Welcome back to the show. I've got the one and only with me today. It's Andy Schectman from Miles Franklin, and he's going to lay it down. We got a conversation for you today. Somebody roll that beautiful intro. Let's get to it.
Digital Perspectives with Brad Kimes. Come on in.
Welcome back to the show. As promised, voila, it's Andy Schectman. Andy, how you doing, man?
I'm good, brother. Great to see you, Brad. Look forward to seeing you next week in Vegas, and I can't wait, and honored to be there.
Hey, man, we're honored to have you. We are honored to have you, Andy. I can tell you that. And I have told people, and I tell them again today, that Lynette Zhang, Jason Cousins, who you've just struck a deal with Glint, which I think is amazing, and yourself will be on stage discussing gold, tokenization, CBDCs, and you cannot have the conversation about the new financial system and a new era of finance without talking about gold, just like talking about tokenization. What say you, Andy?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's true. I think that there is a high probability of seeing the on-demand liquidity that XRP provides with a gold bias on a stablecoin. I think it will become, from everything that I read and from talking with you, which certainly pushes me over the ledge, I think there's a high probability it becomes amongst the favorite vehicles for all the blockchain platforms, and in particular, I think it's a perfect vehicle for gold as a stable coin, as it becomes more and more and more, I think, pivotal and important in the financial landscape. And I think it will. I mean, look, it was reclassified the only other tier one reserve asset. And, I think this is the way that countries will move away from U.S. treasuries that have counterparty risk, that have default risk, that have sanction risk. It was bad enough that Janet Yellen was in Brazil, a charter member of the BRICS, the B in BRICS, saying, it's not enough to sanction Russian assets. We need to confiscate them. Then a few days later, she's speaking to CNBC and says, if China gives any money whatsoever, even though they're allies in the BRICS, again, the R and the C in BRICS, if China gives any money whatsoever to the Russian effort to fight Ukraine, forget about the fact that we've given them $200 billion with no congressional oversight. But if Russia does that, why then, we will sanction their banks, their companies, and Beijing itself. And so I think the need for something other than the SWIFT system, the US dollar transaction system, the bond market, there's need for it. And when you talk about stable coins, when you talk about gold, which is the tier one asset, when you talk about the ability to bridge from country to country or from jurisdiction to jurisdiction, moving wealth, moving money outside the system, outside of SWIFT, I think the probability of seeing that on-demand liquidity for XRP with a gold bias becomes stronger and stronger and stronger by the day. And just the things you said to me this morning off air just pushed me over that line. So yeah, I do think that this conference is coming at the right time. And I think there's a lot of valuable information that people need to understand about Ripple and what the potential it really brings to a system that is unquestionably changing, Brad. No question about it. We're on the cusp of some big changes in the entire financial landscape.
Well, Andy, I love that you started with SWIFT and the sanctions and Janet Yellen making the remarks that she did in Brazil and these other places. I just love this because this sets the tone. I think you and I even had a conversation in one of our interviews, it'd been a few months ago, where we talked about everything they're doing is driving people away from the US dollar. In fact, what we are seeing with the sanctions and seizing assets is showing the rest of the world your best chance of survival is to go join the BRICS coalition, because those SWIFT sanctions are like the greatest advertisement to join the BRICS coalition, because if you don't want to be held the way Russia is and have your assets frozen and all of this other stuff, the only way to get around it is to join BRICS. It's like the greatest advertisement in the world. So I don't think they could do a better job in the U.S. of driving people away from the dollar than other countries that are saying simply to drop the dollar.
Right. Absolutely. I mean, if they've ever incentivized an effort or incentivized the need for creating non-US dollar payment services or systems rather, this is it. Now, that doesn't mean that you won't see something with the US dollar tied to Ripple. I'm not saying that, but I'm saying that the bridge to be able to transact outside the dollar is growing by the day. And you can see that, you can feel it. And I think that the question has always been, what will the rails be? How will it happen? And the things that you've been saying to me and the things that I've been reading lead me to believe very strongly that there is a high probability that Ripple will be the chosen rails. And so, yeah, I think you can't make it up. The weaponization of the dollar may have been the dumbest thing that we've ever done as a nation, because the country is, or the government, our entire system is viewed by a lot of the world as being wholly hypocritical, where we can invade Iraq 20 years ago, still occupy their country, went there under the guise of weapons of mass destruction, didn't find any, destroy their country, topple their regime, still sanctioning 14 of their banks, and directing all of their natural resource revenue to where they made $95 billion in oil revenue in 2023. They asked for $1 billion at the end of the year, and we said, not a good time. So they've kicked Western coalition forces out of the country, or in the process of doing that. They made trading in dollars illegal. There are no more green dollar bills as of January 1 in any of the banks in Iraq, and they formally applied to BRICS. These are the types of moves that we are making that is fostering the need to break away from the SWIFT system and to break away from the treasury market. And I think both of these things are happening in real time. And so the need for something transparent, as Zoltan Pozsar says, we are entering Bretton Woods 3, a system that will be based upon commodities and transparency. What better way to marry gold, which is the only other tier one reserve asset in the world that the central banks have been buying hand over fist, and something as elegant and as transparent and as immediate as the Ripple network. So yeah, I'm excited to be part of this. I'm excited to learn more. Look, I came into this crypto space kicking and screaming. This is something that was very foreign to me. And the more that I understand certain elements of it, the more intrigued I've become, because I do believe we are entering a phase where the current system has run its course. And it's almost as if we are incentivizing this purposely. Just as a corollary, and I don't want to go down this road. I've talked a lot about it this week, but I want people, when they have a few minutes, to Google Cloward-Piven theory. And the Cloward-Piven theory blew my mind. And I want to thank my buddy Mark Moss for opening my eyes to it. But everyone should read the Cloward-Piven theory. And it's a theory that was taught by husband and wife, Cloward and Piven, professors at Columbia University. Just so happens that several U.S. politicians, including Barack Obama, and also the current lead economic advisor to the White House, Jared Bernstein, went there and understand this theory. Now, Jared Bernstein's main thesis is to lose the reserve status. It's a privilege we can no longer afford. So weaponizing the dollar, signing an executive order to go green, that's a good way to start the ball rolling for sure. But check out the Cloward-Piven theory. You can't make it up. And I think it will blow people's mind to a degree that you'll say to yourself, oh my God, they're doing this right now. So do yourselves a favor, something to read over the weekend. Won't take you more than 20 minutes to read it. It'll blow your mind.
I definitely will be reading that over the weekend. I can't wait to read it.
Well, when you do, you'll understand exactly your own. It will reinforce your message. There's a need for a change. And there's a need for transparency, and there's a need for a new system that the U.S. has really, I think, squandered being the center of free trade in the world reserve currency. And there is indeed, I think, a perfect breeding ground for something like XRP and Ripple, and transparency and speed that really isn't at the behest of one central authority like the Federal Reserve or the U.S. government. So anyways, I'm excited to be part of it, and I'm excited to see how it all unfolds.
Oh, me too. I'm so very excited. And, speaking of that excitement, Ripple has recently announced that they want to launch a stable coin this year. But there's some interesting macro things that are kind of taking place at the same time, Andy. And let me just lay these out here like I did off camera, see if I can kind of string it together here. And we don't know. This is speculative, right? So we're speculating, but these are the things that are taking place. So at the same time that Ripple says we're going to be launching a stable coin this year, the United States is closer than ever to launching a stable coin bill this year. One of the funny things inside that stablecoin bill is a provision that says that if a stablecoin bill or provider is not operating compliant or in an illicit manner, they could take that over with the FDIC as a conservatorship and figure out what to do with that entity after that point. Now, what's interesting is that USDTether, and it was just recently cited by some of these same senators like Senator Lummis and Sherrod Brown, that there's illicit activity happening through Tether from China to Russia to avoid these sanctions that you and I just talked about. And who would have ever thought that Janet Yellen would be the biggest salesman for BRICS coalition, right? But all the things that she's been saying is driving everyone there into a de-dollarization movement.
Right.
Now, when I look at all of these things, Andy, knowing Ripple's on the edge of launching a stable coin, then I remembered, and I popped up out of sleep. I remembered, I was like, wait, USDTether announced late last year that they were partnered with the Secret Service and the FBI. And I started asking myself, Andy, well, that sounds a lot like a conservatorship. And knowing the Secret Service was originally created to combat financial terrorism and counterfeit money, and they still do today, they're partnered with Tether. And I think, wow, Ripple wants to launch a stable coin. Government's launched a stablecoin bill. They got a provision to do conservatorship if you're out of compliance. It appears that Tether's already under some kind of conservatorship. What if the acquisition is the stablecoin bill launches, and then we see the Federal Reserve or the FDIC take over Tether for that conservatorship, and then give it to Ripple, which has the XRP ledger, which also is a decentralized exchange for the world. And you've just plugged in 95% of all transactions for the digital asset market on the XRP ledger.
Yeah, it's funny. A lot of the things that I talk about, I take all of the facts like you just did, the facts, and then put them together and then apply Occam's razor. What is the most likely and plausible outcome? I mean, I think you make a compelling argument for that. The facts that Tether has had, all sorts of question marks surrounding it, its practices, its ability for these countries to sidestep U.S. sanctions and still trade in dollars, is very probable. So when you talk about that, plus all of the people who are on the board or who have worked with Ripple, it becomes even more interesting. So I think the key is, and you do a very good job of this, and I try my best on, as it relates to precious metals and what's happening with the BRICS, you take all of those facts, you put them together, and you look, what is the most plausible, realistic outcome? I think there is a high probability of that. And, I've been waiting for Tether to blow up for a very long time, or for it to be taken over or whatever it may be. But it's just, it's one of these deals that seems to make a lot of sense. And in particular, with the board members that seem to give this whole program tremendous legitimacy, you would think that it would be enough to push it over the edge to do just that. I think that is a high probability. It's exciting if you think about it. And it's one of these things that happens just like that. Once the plug gets pulled, you have to be able to move seamlessly into something else. And it would seem to me that this would be the perfect way that you could accomplish that you could move right from one platform to another rather seamlessly and do it in a manner that has already made sure that all of their ducks are in a row to be compliant. let alone here in the United States, rather than domiciled somewhere in another country off the grid, where there isn't the ability, perhaps, for the oversight by the regulators the way that they would be able to oversee things here in the United States, with a company based in San Francisco.
It begs the question when you bring in the board members of Ripple, you're referencing, or just anybody, or Ripple advisors, even from Ripple advisors to Ripple board members. I'm going to run down some of the names I know. Susan Friedman came from the Treasury. She's now head of policy over in the UK. We had Craig Phillips, who was there for a minute, and I don't think he's there still today, but Michael S. Barr, who came from the U.S. Treasury, architected the Dodd-Frank Act and FSOC, also now left and is the vice president, Federal Reserve Board of Governors, and he's working on stablecoin legislation. Right. We have Rosie Rios, the 43rd treasurer. Her name is on more money around the world than any other human being on earth. To the point you're making, and the speculative thought that I'm looking at, I'm like, well, if I look at it like Ripple's about to be awarded, or receivership of USDTether, and that could be their stablecoin. I'm not saying it is. I'm just saying I could see a moment where you could bring it in compliance very quickly, because not one transaction on RippleNet has not been KYC or AML or CFT, which is all compliant for regulation and finance. So all of this really starts to say, hey, even if it isn't, there's certainly great signs of understanding, like Ripple is looking to be inside the financial system with that heavy of a roster in their camp.
Yeah, well, look, there's failure of trust in many of the American icons, the banking practices, the financial market controls, the economic statistics, all of these things. And I think the need for transparency is tremendous. And if you are going to usher in a new system, or you are going to try and regain, your hegemony that seems to be slipping, maybe already has slipped away in terms of the hegemony, but you could say the dollar supremacy is still there, but the trust isn't. And I think you need something like a Ripple to be able to show trust, to show legitimacy, to not be opaque, to not say we promise. And it makes a great deal of sense. It truly does. And, it's exciting to have a very small part of it, watch in real time. And I do believe, and I've been very consistent in this, I do believe there will be a marriage between something like Ripple and gold, to have transparency and to have something that is immutable. And to be able to show the world, you can't, when you squander trust the way that the United States has on many levels, I think in order to get it back, there has to be no question that what it is that you're proposing is not only completely and totally real and legitimate, but that it's transparent for everyone to see. Because I think it's very easy to become very cynical these days in the world that we see around us, and that's going mad. And when you read the Cloward-Piven theory and put it together with what's happening here in the United States, it becomes very obvious that this is a country that's kind of off the rails. And so to bring it back into focus, you need something, and a good place to start is with the financial system, one that is, an attempt to take back some of that lost trust.
There's no doubt. I don't think you could say that any better than you just said it. The lost trust. Right? It is about lost trust. It is about the fractional lending that is the backbone of our Keynesian system, right? Our debt-based system. And it is about this transition, I believe, to the Austrian style, right? Of where you're going to go to an asset-backed, multipolar asset-backed system. And you just don't do that in one day. That is a major philosophy transition. And I get why the banks are fighting it. They don't want to be held one-to-one or a surplus. They've been fractional lending forever. They're kicking and screaming all the way to the dance, right? They don't want this.
No, I do believe that it will become amongst the favorite vehicles for all the blockchain platforms that where you're trading stablecoins. And this is something that is needed. There's no question about it. And when you look at all of the things that Ripple has going for it, Um, when you take a look at, the XRP Ripple network and all of the things they have going for it, and then put it together with gold's reclassification as tier one, it's a perfect symbiotic relationship. And I'm not saying it will just be gold, but I do believe that there will be, you could say tokenization of assets across the board, not just gold, to gain legitimacy and all sorts of things. Having that immediate on-demand liquidity, on-demand, transaction ability is something that is long past its time. We need it now, and um, I think it's happening in a manner whereby if something doesn't happen here rather quickly, for the U.S. dollar or for the U.S. system, if we don't transition away from the current system into one that inspires trust, this country's in for a very big eye-opening awakening moment, because the rest of the world is trying to do this in and of themselves. If you look at what the BRICS are doing, they're doing this already with the Project M Bridge. And so this is something that the rest of the world sees as a necessity: transparency, the ability to transact outside the SWIFT system, and something that, and I don't mean to use the word tether, but something that tethers legitimacy to a system that, all politicians since the beginning of time have chosen inflation over austerity. And even in the way that we've given money, if you will, to the Ukraine, $200 billion with no congressional oversight, no oversight. No one knows where that money went. The lack of transparency inspires an awful lot of cynicism. And I think that's what this world needs. And that's what XRP would bring to the table: would be transparency, would be speed of transaction, and a perfect vehicle to tie sorts of stable coins, to a system that I think you could make an argument could go far beyond gold stable coins and much deeper than that. And it's a very interesting thought experiment to think that how quickly things would change if this were implemented across the whole gamut of all financial services. So, yeah, I think, you're at the tip of the spear, and your knowledge in this field is extraordinary. I learn a lot from you just by talking with you. And I'm trying very much to bring my old school mentality into the 21st century. And I see it. And it's hard for me to almost sometimes even admit that. But I do see it. And I do think it is highly probable that we will see this marriage and that you will be proven right. And one of the biggest reasons I feel that is, like you said, the board members, the people who are attaching their name to this program are highly accredited. And you don't see that type of movement from people who are, up in the highest ranks of government or in the Federal Reserve or in the Treasury, that are attaching their names to this without it being very, very substantial.
I think you make such a great point, Andy. And I want to remind everybody that, a couple things. I mean, there's many things. I just want to grab two things that you said out there and wrap us on this point. One, your mention of the structure that Ripple has done with XRP and XRP Ledger, and that business model structure and incorporation of how they use that technical stack. And I think that's such an important thing because it allows for that transparency that you're talking about. And then on top of it, gold. When you talked about the loss of trust, it's gold. Gold is God's money, and no one argues that gold has value and that it really is a currency. And with the combination of the technology today, we can truly now move it around the world just like money. And what an amazing idea that is. Andy, take us out with a final thought here.
Yeah, and then I like that last point that you just said, using the Project M Bridge, we saw the first ever gold transaction cross-border using the digital yuan.
Yep.
So there's no reason to not think that this is exactly what we would see here. And you're right, gold now being tier one, considered as wealth, a riskless asset. I'm excited to see, brother. I really, truly am. And we need it. And what better way to do it than the XRP Ripple network, who seems to have backing by a lot of people who had careers in the traditional form of wealth and money in the Treasury Department and whatnot. They too realize that we need a new system, and these people are putting their name and their reputation behind it. It seems like, using Occam's razor again, the most logical outcome is probably the right one. And to me, it seems ridiculously logical. It screams logic. And I'm excited to ride shotgun with you, or even in the back seat, and just watch as much as I can and be part of this. So thanks for allowing an old school guy like me to cut his teeth in this, to learn about it. It's very exciting to me. And one of the things that I think is the most important thing is to always remain open-minded. And as it pertains to this, my mind has actually been blown open, and continue every day to look forward to learning more from you and all the people at the great show that you're putting on next week in Vegas, and see where the chips fall.
Well, look, I wish I could leave it at just your welcome, but I'm taking from you too, and so is my audience, right? The Belt Road Initiative, all your knowledge going on over there and what's going on with BRICS. Believe me, this is not a one-way street. We are taking from Andy Schectman at the same time. But I encourage everybody in my audience to take advantage of the best prices of precious metals, which is in fact at Miles Franklin. And all you have to do is put info at Miles Franklin in your email, and in the subject box write dig gold. That's all you got to do. You're going to get the best prices of precious metals in the world, period. It's that simple. Andy, thank you so much for being here.
Look forward to seeing you next week, brother. Again, thanks for having me. And you're right, it's info@milesfranklin.com, dig gold, and we'll take good care of your people. Questions or just the price list, you name it. Safe travels to you to Vegas. I look forward to seeing you. And again, much thanks, brother. Appreciate it.
Hey, thank you, Andy. Safe travels yourself. We can't wait to see you and everyone else there.
Likewise.